Awareness, in the context of all there is, you just have a field of consciousness, a field of information, and it's us attempting to make sense of it that creates the separation. When in all there is all there is. And when there's an information exchange, it's in the idea that something is separate from all that is. And it's only in our perception. There's 7 billion people on the planet. 7 billion different points of view. 7 billion different experiences of what is real, what's the truth. No one has the truth. No one's right, no one's wrong.
Yeah.
Well, who gets to say though?
I mean, yeah.
At what point?
We all do. We all do.
The singularity is like
It's an
something that I
individual
keep hearing, like she was saying that she's a woman and whatnot, and the singularity is projected to occur within like the next 50 years, and it'll be to where you can map your consciousness and upload your consciousness to a machine, and that machine could have a robotic form. You could launch that robotic form into outer space and send it to the edge of the solar system, and that's really your awareness and consciousness that's been mapped and uploaded to it and taken another form. I mean, like, there's the ways things are changing and the technologies that are being developed can fundamentally change how we think of what our consciousness is, because we're at a point right now to where those are still not mainstream and it's still something that's being developed, and we don't really know what the outcomes, stuff like that is going to be, and we've been in this physical form for a couple thousand years, so like there's a lot of evolution and how we relate to those types of concepts. You could say the same thing. You could upload your consciousness into a program. That program could be put digitally into a machine that has a map of our solar system, that you're not actually physically in a mechanical machine that takes you to the edge of, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
What's really the difference?
Right.
Well,
one of the things is, how do you know who you are? I mean, it comes down to fundamental identity. Who are you? Most of what you know yourself to be is merely a collection of knee-jerk, habitual learned responses in order to survive childhood alive. To play well with others, and it's like, is that who you really are, or is it something more? And if that's who you are, and if that goes away, and it's in a machine, it's probably a transition into transhumanism. Is like, at what point do you stop being you? At what point do you stop being a human being? If you have 2 bionic legs and new eyes, and you have cellular regeneration, it's being done for you. At what point are you and not?
If you have an axe that you've had for 20 years and has 3 new heads and 4 new handles, is it the same axe? No. It's the same thing with your body. Your body is regenerating cells all the time.
mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting.
Well, this keeps coming back to that the essence of who we are is our mind and our bodies and our thinking.
But are we?
Well, that's my point, is that we are far more than that, in my opinion. But anyway, I had a visual aid for how we're connected I made several years ago. I call it my illusion of it's called the duality, the grand illusion, that we're separate from that spiritual side. So on here you see it's like these represent people.
Oh.
And they're all isolated. And as you can see, they can't see each other. If I was I did this about 8 years ago. If I did it again, it would be lower so they could see each other. But the thing is, the aha is realizing they're all connected. So that's the paradigm shift, is that we are all connected, and we kind of have these blinders on. And in reality, we kind of see we're connected. In this case, because the way I did this, they're isolated, but in reality we see something that we can connect to about ourselves in everybody. And the more we get to know people, we get to see that. But in reality, the ego perspective, the human perspective, allows us, it's God or whatever you want to call that, all it is, experiencing itself and us experiencing it individualized. And so that's why I call it the grand illusion of duality, because there's great value in that perspective. But like Jan was saying, we are we're arguing from such a finite point of view, and all it can be is speculation. That's why I like the practical stuff. I like all this other stuff, but to me, it's like, okay, so what do you do about this in your day-to-day life? How does it affect mankind going forward, evolutionary-wise? At least include that part.
Does anyone have a question that would apply to the practical application? Someone over here?
Well,
Oh.
yeah, what I see missing here in this conversation about consciousness and awareness is the undercurrent of intentionality. That every time someone's growing their consciousness or their awareness, they have an intention to do that. I think any type of consciousness, awareness, and the growth on a spectrum or reaching out or something starts with some intentionality, and that would be, considering magnitudes of intentionality, that you want to connect more with someone else or with on a global scale, and also what direction is the intention coming from? Is it that you are on the receiving end of intentionality, or you are the generator? But I think without intention, in quantum physics they talk about like things don't exist until somebody observes them, until they actually intend to look for a chair, and chair appears. But if I'm not looking for chairs and I'm not conscious of that right now, does that chair still exist? So there's this intentionality undercurrent that I've heard in everyone speaking that's kind of like missing in the
Well, that's
in the
what
soup.
awareness is being aware and making a choice and choosing what you want.
But did your spontaneous experience when you were young, was that something you intended to have, or
it
did
was.
it just happen?
For me, it was.
Okay, so you were looking for that experience and then it
I
showed
didn't
up?
know that experience existed, but I was looking for something. I was looking for greater knowledge and perspectives, and I wasn't happy where I was.
I've heard
So I was
some
looking
people-
for something different and something
I want to say
grander.
something, but before I do,
Yeah.
I know you have your hand up, and I want to concede the floor to you, and then I'll make my point.
Well, this is in conjunction with what's being shared, and also with, in some sense, a practical application, being that consciousness can be used as a reference point for various states of being and other methods we can use to describe these states, like Maslow's hierarchy of need. I pose that for the purposes of clarification, for any of you to perhaps share the distinction of the process between, when we're talking about the state of I or I am, the process between self-realization and self-actualization, and something becoming actualized, and perhaps through intention or a sense of it becoming, rather than just realized, actualized and manifested in a realistic, applicable way. So if any of you would like to comment about the process between the two.
Well, I'm not sure that what I was going to say relates to that.
Make it.
You're
You're brilliant.
I'm sure I can tell. For me, self-actualization, it means actualizing what is there, already there. And that it's the same thing as self-realization. So I don't see a distinction between realizing, I make real or make actual.
Well, there's a distinction from the outside. Once you realize it, you realize you're there. But if you don't have the realization, that's part of what he's talking about. Once you get there, looking back, like with me, it's like a Wizard of Oz. I've already have what I'm looking for. I'm not here to grow spiritually. I'm here learning how to be spiritual in my humanness. And so, yes, it's already within us, but until you have that awareness, it's something outside and something you have to do.
Well, I have a little bit different perspective, just coming at it very pragmatically, and I'm not trying to address the philosophical component of your question. I'm just trying to address the pragmatics of your question. The path between self-realization and self-actualization, they go hand in hand, because what I see over and over and over again is if you think of the mind like a computer program, the vast majority of people, it's not just one program, they've actually got hundreds of programs operating simultaneously. And what for normal people takes place is there's a lot of conflict between those programs. There's different demands for the resources that are available to the person. One part of us wants to do this, another part of us wants to do that, another part of us is, oh my gosh, I could never do that. And we don't recognize these conflicts because they operate below the surface of awareness. Well, as you become more self-aware, you assimilate more and more of what's happening in your subconscious up into communication with your conscious awareness. So your awareness of self goes deeper and deeper into who you are, and you become more and more aware of these programs and potential conflicts in these programs. And the path, in my mind, from a very pragmatic level, the path to self-actualization is becoming aware of all these programs that are operating and bringing them into harmony with each other. And when you've done that, where you're aware of all the programs and you have made them work together so that the entirety of your operating system is moving in one direction, then you are self-actualized. It's an internal state. It's not an achievement that occurs on the outside. It's total inner harmony. That's how I see it.
And it could be just a single aspect from the way I see it. So like if you have the internal realization that you're creating all the conflict in your life, and once you realize that you're creating it and you stop creating it, then you're more peaceful.
Correct.
Then it's totally an internal phenomenon.
Right.
And it's only that, but it could only be just about that one aspect of life, and it's not like
It could
the
be.
rest of your life becomes a miracle. It could out of that one thing, but
Well,
right. So it
well-
doesn't. You don't always see an outside result. Somebody might see that. Oh, he's not argumentative like he was yesterday. But
So what
Right.
you say
Right,
is
but-
awareness is a product of ego?
me?
I just said that.
I don't know about that. I got different definitions for ego and awareness and consciousness.
So there's plants that have awareness, like he was talking about mushrooms earlier, that if you step on a group of mushrooms that are sprouting, that it's actually aware that something has made an imprint in the soil and it'll seek to fix whatever might have been damaged. So it's kind of aware of its environment, but it's not.
It's responding. It's like if I cut my arm, there will be
Platelets
white blood
and-
cells and everything that come there to try and clot the wound and so on.
Mm.
These are automatic processes that somehow there is an awareness that occurs of an event that has happened, and then they have an intent. But whether they're having a conversation going, "Blimey, it was my day off, now I've got to go do this," I don't think that's going on. I think it just happens.
Automatic, but not a
it's-
backstory.
There's no backstory,
Yeah.
right? So,
There's no mechanism.
and I think the big
Or
thing
drama.
about humans, taken into that, is that we spend a lot of time thinking about our stories
Yeah.
rather than doing stuff.
Yeah.
I have a question for Dr. Jen, Professor Jen. Do you think that lucid dreaming is part of out-of-body experience?
I don't know. It may be, or at least at times it might be, but I'm not sure that it always is.
I've had lucid dreams where I've gone out of body, either deliberately or.
They can happen separately, right?
Yeah.
Because
Right.
out of body is lucid by definition, isn't it?
I suppose it would be.
Hyper lucid. But not all lucid dreams are out of body.
Right, yeah, that's my, because I've had moments of lucidity in my dreaming where I'm just aware that I'm dreaming, but it doesn't involve an out-of-body experience as far as I'm aware.
You can make it though. How many people here have actually had a lucid dream? Okay, here's a trick for those of you that haven't, or those of you that have want to have another one.
Look at your hand.
Yeah, look at Look at your hand.
So there's all kinds of, the one I was going to suggest is find a book in your dream. Read a paragraph. If you read the same paragraph again, it's different.
You know what my problem is? I don't know the language of the books that I find.
And that will work too. Anything like that that's a trigger. And yes, the hand is a weird one, I don't know why.
Yeah,
But
I don't know it.
if you read a paragraph in a book, it'll change. Okay. The big trigger that I have is usually there'll be some strange, crazy event like a plane crashing, and I'll go, "Oh my God, this is real." Okay, because those kind of things don't generally happen to me, not for ages now. So the fact that that's something happening is a trigger for me to go find a book. All right, and then see whether it's changed, and then I realise that it actually is a dream, then off I go. You go flying or something.
And also you can try to see your body.
Yes, and I've done that before too. I've flipped around so I can see outside my body, and yes, there's a question.
Yeah, I was thinking, so the basic premise here is the consciousness and spirituality, as I understand, is that right?
Say that again, please?
Basic premise. of
Not for all of us.
Oh, okay.
It's not an
Sorry.
emphasis
I
as
see,
much
I see. I
for
didn't
some.
really get it. Because, so, if that is the case, then what do you think about Stephen Hawking, who came out and said he's an atheist now, after finding out the Gibbs particle. So he knows there is a God's particle. We know where the life comes from. What do you think about those people?
I would
Do they
say,
need-
They're the devil.
as one of those devils, I would say that
Yeah.
I believe that there is something greater than myself, but I also am an atheist, okay? Because I can find physical processes that connect all of those things together to a singular life force, which all it does is replicate and adapt to its environment, okay? And we are the latest iteration of that adaptation and replication, okay? But it's all connected. So, my consciousness gets passed back into the earth, travels through whatever life forms it chooses to pass through, and I am still part of the oneness of all things, okay? But I'm not a big fan of the whole Charlton Heston model, okay? So, you see, right? So that's what. So yes, there can still be a spirituality without, for want of a better term, the Holy Spirit, okay? So.
Oh, I got another visual aid. This is kind of small. But if you can see what that symbol is, it's a YinYang, right, pendant. And I was using it for one of my classes. I was looking for, because to me, I was using the YinYang as a metaphor for the white being the spiritual aspect of us, and the dark being not the dark side of us, but the physical. And that life on this plane is about, humans having a spiritual experience, or spiritual beings having a human experience. And so on this pin, you can't really tell, but the dots are actually eyes. So it's kind of like we have two eyes, and it gives us a multiple dimensional reality versus one eye. And one eye, one perspective, one part of the brain is a little bit more geared towards the abstract beyond the human thinking, to quantum leaping as far as thoughts and intuition. So the idea is that we can be seeing the world more from the human perspective, or more of the spiritual perspective at any time. And in Buddhism, and in Eckhart Tolle's work, it's a lot about detaching from the physical. And to me, and it's like all paths are right, it's whatever resonates for you. And then there's other people that are explaining everything more on the material side, and that's good because it's all truth. It's a different emphasis, a different passion. To me, it's living life more from a place of balance, of alternating. So I'm going more from my humanness when I'm engaging with somebody and I get triggered, where early in my life I used to disengage, so I just stay spiritual and kind of like Eckhart Tolle. And so now it's about going back and forth. And so it's variations of that duality of those two perspectives that are so fantastic about the human experience. And some of us really want to get more into the physical side, and that's wonderful. And some of us want to go a lot more into spiritual. For me, it's the blending of the two. And I think for John too, right?
Yeah.
And several of us here.
What if we get to higher consciousness and they don't like it?
What? There's no not liking. Higher consciousness is a higher.
No, you haven't been there yet.
For me, I'm talking about my truth. So my truth is it's always more loving, more accepting, more loving of myself, of other people, more accepting. Every time I've had that awareness, it's not just tolerant. You know, people say, oh, you shouldn't be angry, you should be tolerant. Well, that's an improvement, that's a level of consciousness, but it's an improvement. So to me, the higher levels, there's no disappointments.
I would hope that the greatest gift of eternal consciousness is the ability to forget.
There's no reason, and there's no reason to forget, because the judgment doesn't matter on a higher level. On a lower level, forgetting is the best thing.
Is that on an individual level, or is that like on a
Yes.
group level or global?
I'm saying there's-
once you get to looking at the global level and like
Yes.
seeing how the globe
I see it,
actually
you see, when
operates
you
as one
change the
organism,
way,
and then you look at people and you're just like,
you know, the saying Wayne Dyer said, when you
Me.
change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And so the thing is, you see different aspects. So you can see plants at war, fighting with each other, or animals, and then you see a beautiful cycle and harmony that's going on in all this interaction, and even the bad things happening in the world are part of the evolutionary change. Individually, they're very bad, horrendous, but they're part of this ongoing evolution of mankind to integrate more higher awareness, higher consciousness, coming from a higher perspective and less of the fight-flight type thing.
but could you say the same thing about like contracting AIDS or something?
We can say
Yes.
the same thing about
I mean,
childbirth.
like,
Yes,
I mean,
same
if
thing,
you-
childbirth is an excellent example.
Yeah, if you had no frame of reference for what childbirth was and you suddenly saw it for the first time, think, oh my God, that's horrible, what the hell is that?
You know,
It's good that we don't remember.
I've heard women say they don't remember. You know,
Well,
so
I'm not one of those women, I
You didn't
remember
remember?
that from
Yeah.
birth.
I look
So-
more like
Yeah, that's a
the
myth.
cutting down of the forest,
I remember every
fishery depletion, ocean acidification, you know, like whenever you start looking
Right.
at those elements that are
But
our
individually,
life
yes.
systems and
Yeah.
look at how we're affecting those on our global consciousness,
So
like that's
Jason's
more what I'm
Jason's
addressing,
got a
I'm not
great
really
point,
addressing
and this
like
is,
the personal.
and this is
interaction.
what I'm wanting to say to that. This goes to the higher consciousness thing. Let's, from our point of view, because we're right down here, that looks bad, all right? And honestly,
it is bad from
Okay.
the higher perspective. I mean, from the
But so,
from
perspective.
that
so it's
perspective,
contracting AIDS,
But
you know what I mean?
if you go up
And that's why
high
I kind of
enough,
associated.
if you go up high enough, let's say for a second that what life needs right now, and I keep going back to this because it's my thing at the moment, sorry. 5 years ago it was about dolphins having names, so yeah. We build spaceships and we colonize the planets, and off we go, and that's fine. Earth settles back to whatever it needs to be next, but it doesn't need us around anymore, so all this acidification and everything else like that takes care of us, right? We're gone. And now Earth can go back to being nice and green and verdant, but without us weirdos on it. Okay? So there's a higher
I
good.
don't think you're
that
going
comes-
there.
No, I mean, I understand
more
that
positive.
aspect. I mean, like, I've envisioned that aspect of it too, but I just can't see how like that's really.
Well, for an individual, no, but for the aggregate
Yeah.
benefit of life, yes.
Yeah.
And if
No,
life
I-
is eternal on some level, if life, the essence of life is eternal and always expanding, it's part of the expansion. The baby, you know, I was a Baha'i for many years, and one of the analogies they talked about were spiritual beings. I mean, we're humans learning to be spiritual, and that a baby actually is dying in the mother's womb. He's dying from that world and giving it up to be born in this world. And then they would say, when you die in this world, you're giving up this world to expand into a spiritual plane.
They did an experiment recently, didn't they? With they took a caterpillar and it turns into a butterfly, and they did this weird thing because what happens is it basically breaks down into this goo, all right, and then comes out as a butterfly. And they did this experiment where they found that the butterfly had the memories of what the caterpillar experienced. Okay, they did some weird, I don't know, they give it a stick or something. Butterfly was afraid of sticks, I don't know, something like that. But so any transition can be horrible, or it can be weird, but there can be some information that gets transferred from one state to the next. So,
Something gained from it.
yeah, like maybe
Yeah.
maybe there's 250,000 people. Their mission in life was to be a statistic, so we never have another nuclear war. Okay?
Playing that role.
Yeah.
If life is eternal, on some level, if you believe that also, that makes it a little easier.
Yeah. Because if we hadn't dropped the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, maybe during the Bay of Pigs, or, you know, that would have been the end for everyone. So, okay, yes, sorry.
So you mentioned information transferring.
Yes.
I'm really curious about if there's an aspect of that that goes on with near-death experience or out-of-body experience or communicating with, perhaps, I mean, if you're a medium, and with your expertise on all of this and how it relates, because
Yeah, well, I'm not sure how it relates, but what comes to me in response to your question is, yes, near-death experiencers talk about, like one of the common features of a near-death experience, it's not universal, but it's common, is a life review, where the person reviews and re-experiences at every moment of their life. Typically, it's every moment of their life. And they also experience witness consciousness at the same time. So there are actually at least 4 things going on. They're reviewing it, re-experiencing it, perceiving it from this witness state, and also experiencing being on the receiving end of their actions. So there is, and it's not like I imagine what it was like when I hit you. I am you, and I experience that slap. And so, from that perspective, we're always actually much more connected and conveying information. It's almost like that quantum thing where we're not conveying the information, it's happening simultaneously. That while I'm doing what I'm doing, I am you experiencing being on the receiving end, even in this moment.
And if you think about it, every major religion has one thing in common, which is the golden rule. Okay? Do unto others as you have to do it to you.
And it's exactly that.
Yeah. And if we stress that with everybody from birth, right? Say, okay, when you die, the last thing that's going to happen to you is every bad, lousy thing you did to someone else is going to get done to you. So
And
think
good,
about it.
and good, wonderful thing too.
And good, wonderful
Yeah.
thing too, right? So then you can have an easy transition, or you can have a hard transition. And that's, I think, it would be just a nice generic philosophy to pass on, which gets lost in the mix of noise and hyperbole.
Yes, that's a really good point. The other thing that NDEers talk about is information transfer with spiritual entities. And communication at that level tends to occur sort of telepathically, mind to mind. And NDEers often say that in the presence of spiritual entities, they got information. Sometimes they got it by asking a question, and they described that the moment that the question even formed in their mind, the answer was there. And there's a lot of realization, like, oh yeah, like how could I have forgotten this? Like I knew, I understood all of this before, and how could I have forgotten it? And it's back to how, when we're embodied, we're kind of cut off from all we know. So there is information transfer in that way as well.
Jan, while we're on this subject, could you speak to what shifts in a person's consciousness or their perception of their life once they've experienced an NDE?
Yeah, so there's the research on NDEs has focused on the experience itself, like the contents of the experience, and then the after effects. And what we have found is that generally speaking, the more complex the experience, the more complex the after effects. And NDEs do range from being very simple to very elaborate, different NDEs. And so the more elaborate it is, the more likely the person will have after effects. So the after effects are psychological, like the person's values change. This experience of being on the receiving end of your own actions, that's going to get your attention, right? And so people's values change. They become more compassionate, more concerned about the welfare of others, and less concerned about materialism and fame and fortune and all those things that our Western culture is so big on. And spiritual changes, feeling an ongoing sense of connectedness to this beyond that the person was thrust into. A lot of NDEers, after their experience, become more have telepathy, precognition, a lot of those kinds of skills, healing ability, and physical changes like needing less sleep. And I'm really interested in a phenomenon that has my attention these days, which is electromagnetic after effects, and that's where NDEers in their presence, electrical things malfunction. And a lot of NDEers don't wear watches. And I see some knowing nods and smiles in the audience. And one of the ways at the near-death conference, one of the things that I typically do when I start talking with somebody that I've not met before is I look down to see if they're wearing a watch or not.
Well, you know they're fake. That doesn't happen to all, but a lot.
It doesn't happen to all, but it's a clue that about whether I'm talking to an NDE or not, right? Yeah. So, and then social, all of those changes result in social changes. NDEers have, if they were married at the time of their NDE, they have a high likelihood of getting divorced, not because they become like mean and nasty, but because their values, they are different people than the person who said I do. And so the marriage, the implicit contract of the marriage suddenly becomes null and void because this isn't the same person that went through the wedding ceremony. People move into more helping jobs, going into education, medicine, a lot of hospice volunteers among NDEers. And people change their friend groups just because they're thinking and reflecting on a different level than they were before. And so it really transforms people.
And what about their religious beliefs before and
Yes,
after?
people tend to become less religious but more spiritual. And so this trend that we've been hearing about in the news, that our population in general is becoming less religiously affiliated but more spiritual, referring to themselves as spiritual but not religious, that is the kind of thing that tends to happen with NDEs. But I want to hasten to say that some NDEers remain and become even more involved in organized religion, but they're the minority. The majority find religion to suddenly be too confining for what they know now to be reality.
My father had an NDE, and he was walking with a group of people, and he looked in this box that was sitting on this like scarlet blanket. And he looked in, it was glowing, and he's like, "What is this?" And whoever he was with was, telepathy. They weren't, visible or verbally talking, and they said, "Well, that's your visible universe."
Oh, that's a visible universe, that little, yeah,
In a little shoebox.
And there's all the rest of this. Well, and in fact, one of the things.
We keep it in the garage.
Yeah, some of you know Evan Alexander, the Harvard neurosurgeon who had an NDE during a coma. And the first time I heard him speak, I just loved it. He said, when I was back at Harvard and, doing the brain and all that, he said, I thought that I knew pretty much everything there was to know about consciousness. And he said, since my NDE, I take everything I knew, and it's this much in a vast universe. So it just really, you put the perspective on.
That was my experience. I had all this knowledge come to me, but then it's like this is so small, and there's so much, and it's ongoing, that we don't know, so it's a big leap. But then you have a realization there's more.
Yeah, there's
more.
more. And a lot of NDEers too, and then I'll go back to you, say that in the NDE itself, they knew a lot more than they were able to bring back with them. So it's back to that, when we're embodied, we're limited.
Does it have to be an NDE, or can it be an astral projection? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Well, one of the things that we know from research is that people have quote-unquote near-death experiences under a variety of circumstances. Maybe having a close brush with death is the most reliable way to loosen the connection between, whatever you want to call it, your spirit and your
physics and spirit.
Yeah, the physical. But it can happen under all kinds of usually extreme circumstances, even extreme relaxation of meditation. Meditating and having mystical experiences. People have them in extreme exertion, in extreme emotional states like profound grief. We had a guy at the near-death conference one time talk about how he was in this all-consuming, jealous rage of an argument with his girlfriend. suddenly, boom, he was out, and all this stuff happened, and he was back, and he said he had missed maybe half of a word as far as physical time was, but he had had this very elaborate experience, and his perspective was totally shifted, and it was related to the extreme of profound jealousy. So it can happen under all kinds of extreme
And
circumstances.
did that go away then?
No.
So that's a disassociative experience, it sounds like almost.
No.
He came back, he was still jealous?
No, he was not. He was
Oh, it
not
went away.
jealous. It went
Oh,
away.
okay, that's right.
I thought you meant, when you said it,
Yeah.
I thought you meant the
Okay,
after
he did
effect.
change, yeah.
He transformed in that
Right,
experience.
and from that point on.
Right.
Joe, one interesting thing, if you are, let's say that you go through your life and suddenly you have an experience like an NDE, or you have another experience that's similar in fashion, like the one you just described. If you haven't really thought about what your religious leanings are, the person that you go ask about it is probably going to now frame that in a way that says to you, oh, okay, therefore that was Jesus, or that was John Lennon, or that was Muhammad, or whoever, okay? So, and I've seen this happen, okay, where because the person that you reached out to happened to be of a particular faith, that whole experience became tied to that particular faith, okay?
But what's fascinating is it's common in so many faiths.
Exactly,
And
it is.
especially when you
and
get
that-
into mystics
Right.
and aesthetics.
And who was,
things.
you were saying over there about the ball, and that's the visible reality.
Yes.
It's very much, I hate to use the word problem, but it can be an issue. You can take that whole experience that is a fraction of something and make it the whole thing, and it isn't. Okay, and that's what I was saying.
Or a religion.
Yeah, or any religion. I mean,
Maybe that's where
if
religion.
you are a Christian, I hate to say it, the likelihood is you're a Christian because you were born in America. Okay, if you were born in Iraq, you'd probably be Muslim. So, at least for the first few years of your life.
Legally.
Yeah, that's what I always wondered is how do the NDE experiences, how does that interpretation part of it, like the personal interpretation of their experience, how does that vary across cultures or around the world?
There is a tendency for people to interpret the experience based on their worldview. I mean, what else do we have to interpret it, right? But in fact, tomorrow night is the first Monday of every month is a support and interest group for people interested in all these topics, near-death experiences and everything related to them, which includes after-death communication, past life memories, blah, blah, blah. And we have an Iranian scholar who's here. He has interviewed 20 people in Iran, Shiite Muslims who had near-death experiences. And he's compared the contents of their experiences with the contents of Westerners' near-death experiences. And he's found that like 95% of it is the same. There is a little bit of difference. Western NDEers almost all say that, let me say it this way, I've only encountered one case of someone who ever felt judged in their near-death experience in the Western world. But in the East, I think 2 of his 20 people felt judged. But they also, most of the people didn't feel judged, even though judgment is a big part of Islam.
Now, one of the
And
things,
hell, there's a definite
one of the things
belief
that
in
you've
hell.
talked about before is there's a self-judgment, but it's not coming
Yes.
outside the self.
Right,
So
that's
it's
right.
when they come back into their body and, and rethinking about it, there's that, but they say it wasn't
Well,
external
yes,
a lot
and
of times,
yes,
right?
and even in the experience itself, the person will say they're going through their life review in the presence of the being of light, which is this all-knowing, all-loving entity that absolutely knows everything about them and absolutely loves them unconditionally. And as they're going through their life review and they're coming up to the bad stuff they did, they feel bad. They're not feeling judged at all. In fact, they say that sometimes some of them say even that the being of light has a sense of humor, but more often kind of is philosophical, like, well, you're learning, you're learning about how to become a more loving person. And, but they themselves feel the regret of the choices that they made.
you.